Hey, well, good morning and welcome to another daily devotional. We're diving into 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Paul, again, just correcting the church in Corinth. And today we get into a pretty deep concept that Paul writes to us. And here at Christian Life Center, we believe in the Bible. And so sometimes there's things in the Bible that can be contrary to the way we've been raised or to our tradition. And this is one of those chapters that will kind of challenge you and challenge the way that you view God, the way you view the church, all of these things. But before we get into that, he goes on to call out some people that are dealing with some sexual issues within the church. And the problem with it is not that he's saying these people are struggling and you're helping them carry their burdens. The problem is these people are beginning to have sexual issues, and the church is almost praising them, or it is celebrating them, and it says that you are proud of them. And verse 2 says, "And you are proud. Shouldn't you rather have gone into mourning?" Instead, they are celebrating that this man is dealing with these specific sexual issues that he calls out. And so Paul begins to bring up this concept where he talks about the leaven. He says, be careful of the leaven, or leaven is something that adds, carbon dioxide to bread as it proofs, as it rises. You add a little bit of yeast. We have commercialized yeast, right? We don't necessarily use sourdough or leaven anymore, but they add this yeast to the bread. A little bit of bread makes the whole loaf rise. And Paul begins to say, be careful, because you're adding a little bit of yeast into what is happening in your church, and now that is beginning to grow. And if you remember, this is actually a quote from Jesus. Jesus constantly said, be careful of the leaven of the Pharisees. So this whole concept that he's saying is a little bit of the world can get inside of the church and can cause it to then become very worldly or very sinful. And the problem with the Pharisees was self-righteousness. They thought, well, we were great, we were perfect, we'll just follow the law, we're great. And because of that leaven, it took over their entire lives of their self-righteousness that they missed out on Jesus. And in this one, what he's saying is you are letting the culture or ideals of the culture that you live in become part of your church, and now you are celebrating this whole issue of sexual immorality instead of saying, no, this is not a part of who we are. So this is the part where Paul does something pretty crazy and countercultural here in the last verses. And he talks about, I wrote to you not to associate with people that are sexually immoral. And when he uses that word associate, he's not saying don't, talk to somebody that is dealing with sexual immorality. But what he's saying is don't allow them to become a close, intimate friend of your family. The whole concept of friendship was something very deep in that society that was very uncommon. Versus now, we call everybody friend. Your friend, your friend. We call everybody friend or buddy. And that society, what they're talking about is that deep, close friendship. He's saying do not have that deep, close friendship with people that are struggling with this sin. But he goes on to say something that is quite interesting. In verse 12, he says, what business of it is mine to judge those outside of the church? Then he says this, are you not to judge those inside? So he begins to draw a line. And he says there's the world, then there's the brothers and sisters inside the church. There's the world, and then there's the church. So what he says is the world, and they're going to do what they're going to do. We have no right to judge them, right? They don't believe what we believe. In the same way, if you're a Seahawks fan and someone else is a 49ers fan, you are not going to try and reason with them, and their goals are different than your goals. You're just completely different people. So you're saying, okay, that's you, this is us, but a Seahawks fan will call out another Seahawks fan that's making issues, right? So it's saying, now those inside of the church, we actually are called to judge one another. This is that part I was talking about that's kind of, whoa, is that really in the Bible? Yes, it's really in the Bible. It says God will judge those outside. God's taking care of those outside, but you and I are called to judge those inside of the church. And this word judge really means to hold them accountable to what they signed up for. To say, hey, you're a Christian, you really need to be careful about what's going on here. When your buddy is saying some mean things to his wife, You need to say, hey man, we don't treat our wives that way. We don't do that. When your friend is gossiping, you need to tell her, hey, we don't gossip. We don't do that kind of thing. That you signed up to be a Christian. Christians don't act that way. And that there is this actual sense of, hey, we're different than the world. We are not the world. We are Christians. We are the light of the world. We are supposed to be a shining example for the world, which Paul is getting to. But instead, what is happening in the church in Corinth is they're blending the two worlds together. The fancy theological phrase for this is syncretism. They're trying to synchronize two ways of life together. It's been happening all the way since the Old Testament when they were trying to worship God and Baal. It's part of human nature that we always try and serve two masters. But Paul goes on in another book to say you cannot serve two masters because you will love one and hate the other. So the thing we have to be careful of is to make the distinction. Am I a part of the world? Am I a part of the church? If I'm part of the church, I'm not going to judge those outside of the world. That's God. I'm going to show them grace, show them love, show them mercy. But those inside the church, we really do need to hold each other accountable. And we need to make sure, okay, we are the church. We believe in the Bible. This is what we do. Not that we're trying to synchronize with the world. They have nothing in common with each other, as the book of Hebrews says. That we are the church, and we need to hold each other accountable to what the church is. As hard as that is, that's what the Bible says, that we are called to call out one another, to hold each other accountable. So as an open invitation, if you're part of the church, it's time for all of us to hold each other accountable and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be doing this, and to help people rise to a higher standard. So we love you, and we'll continue diving into this heavy hitter of 1 Corinthians tomorrow. We'll see you then.